dengan lebih, kita kena contribute dengan lebih dengan less resources, dengan resources yang sedikit. And then dia minta kita explain how do you manage. Jadi pada masa itu idea yang timbul di kepala saya adalah kita kena apply lean management, kita kena reduce wastage, kita kena total lab automation dengan sistem integration LIS, dan juga staff mesti multitask. Tapi pada masa itu konsep auto verification belum begitu popular lah, ya. Jadi pada petang ini kita merasa sangat bertuah, ya, kerana penceramah yang kita jemput pada petang ini adalah orang yang sangat orang yang berpengalaman, ya, di dalam melaksanakan konsep auto verification, di mana setakat pengetahuan saya auto verification dilaksanakan di Malaysia ni pertama adalah di Hospital Pulau Pinang, di mana penceramah pada petang ini iaitu Dr. Jamsani dan juga tim mereka daripada Hospital Pulau Pinang telah melaksanakan auto verification, ya. Okey, jadi saya ingin memperkenalkan penceramah kita pada petang ini, iaitu Dr. Dr. Jamsani, ya. Dr. Muhammad Jamsani bin Mat Saleh memperolehi medical degree daripada Universiti Sains Malaysia. Beliau juga mempunyai master in pathology daripada universiti yang sama, dan telah bertugas di hospital, pelbagai hospital, dan sekarang beliau bertugas sebagai chemical pathologist di Hospital Seberang Jaya. Beliau juga adalah seorang yang aktif di dalam aktiviti patologi kebangsaan, di mana menjadi chairman procurement committee, juga member of MOH National Pathology Special Committee, member of MOH National Pathology IT and Database Committee. He is a subject matter expert for the development of National Laboratory Information System in MOH. His interests include lab informatics, endocrine, special protein specialization, and education, which involve lectures, talk, training at state and national level. Beliau telah menerima Outstanding Service Award daripada Penang State Health Department pada tahun 2014 dan 2018, dan beliau telah mendapat Distinguished Service Star Award by Penang State Governor. Jadi tanpa melengahkan masa, saya menjemput Dr. Jamsani untuk menyampaikan ceramah beliau dan juga berkongsi pengalaman tentang clinical issue related to result auto verification. Silakan Dr. Jam.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. Selamat petang, salam sejahtera. Boleh dengar suara saya ke?
Boleh.
Okay. Sebelum itu saya ingin mengucapkan terima kasih kepada Encik Rosli atas jemputan untuk saya berkongsi pada petang ini. Encik Rosli ni saya dah kenal lama sejak daripada Encik Rosli di Hospital Tunku Fauziah, mana kami kerap membuat beberapa journal club sewaktu Encik Rosli bertugas di Perlis. Jadi kesempatan ini saya ucapkan terima kasih, dan sebelum saya nak start nak mulakan pembentangan saya pun, saya dah tengok semua peserta dan saya nampak ada banyak juga nama yang saya agak familiar. Dan kepada siapa yang tak kenal saya jam sana lah, saya sekarang di Hospital Seberang Jaya, sebelum ni saya di Hospital Pulau Pinang. So tajuk yang diminta untuk saya bentangkan adalah berkaitan dengan clinical issue related to result auto verification. Jadi tajuk ini sebenarnya agak luas dan besar. Apa yang akan saya cuba buat pada waktu petang pukul 3, pukul 4 ni adalah kita akan cuba lihat beberapa contoh, dan saya rasa contoh-contoh ni pun saya pernah bentangkan di banyak tempat, tapi mungkin kita lihat secara lebih mendalam, ataupun mungkin boleh memberi sedikit idea bagaimana satu bentuk algoritma ataupun result auto verification itu boleh dilaksanakan. Jadi yang ni saya just nak recap balik apa yang kita buat, apa yang pernah saya buat satu survey pada tahun 2019. Kalau tadi Encik Rosli cakap Hospital Pulau Pinang mungkin hospital yang pertama, yang itu pun saya pun belum pasti sama ada we are the first or among the early ataupun the pioneer of the result auto verification di Kementerian Kesihatan Malaysia. So, pada masa ini terdapat hanya 26% Malaysian laboratories yang setakat ini yang telah melaksanakan result auto verification. Jadi maksudnya kita masih ada banyak lagi peluang untuk kita sebarluaskan dan untuk kita menambah baikkan perkhidmatan kita, kerana kita melihat kepada bagaimana kita boleh menambah kita punya contribution ataupun sumbangan dari segi clinical input dan juga penambahbaikan daripada pengurusan pesakit di hospital masing-masing. Jadi kalau kita recap ataupun kita lihat balik kepada perkara yang pertama adalah berkaitan tentang auto verification. Apa yang dimaksudkan dengan auto verification ni? Maksudnya sejak akhir-akhir ini keluar topik ini ya. Even tahun lepas punya program master bagi exam, iaitu final year exam chemical pathology, seorang auto verification ni turut ditanya sebagai salah satu option untuk dijawab. Jadi auto verification sebenarnya simple, dia hanyalah satu bentuk automated action yang performed by a computer system, yang mana dia adalah related kepada bagaimana keputusan ujian itu dikeluarkan bergantung kepada kriteria ataupun logik yang diwujudkan. Dan ini didokumentkan dan diuji oleh medical personnel ataupun laboratory medical staff sebelum auto verification digunakan. Ini berdasarkan kepada CLISR guideline auto verification. Maksudnya apa yang kita bercakap tentang auto verification ni, kalau siapa yang tak familiar, kita adalah nak melihat bagaimana sesuatu keputusan ujian itu dapat dikeluarkan. Dia bukanlah semudah sekadar mungkin kita mungkin auto verification tu kita keluarkan keputusan ujian yang normal sahaja. Tapi itu bergantung kepada matlamat kita yang nak melihat kepada apa sebenarnya yang kita nak capai dalam auto verification itu. Mungkin kalau kita letak normal result sahaja, setengah-setengah hospital dia masih lagi hanya 50% keputusan ujian yang boleh dikeluarkan secara automated. Tetapi masih ada 50% lagi yang masih memerlukan validation secara manual. So dia juga adalah satu bentuk computer based algorithm in order for us to get a consistent, timely and accurate manner, so that a human prone to get tired, human prone to get to make errors. So by having such a system, we can have more standardization in terms of to make sure that a certain algorithm, which is we might have some SRI or some algorithm to make sure that certain result can be released according this kind of rules. So that komputer sepatutnya dia akan patuh kepada rules kita lah. But still the intellect in terms of interpretation and in terms of the troubleshooting still require kita sebagai professional di laboratory. So kalau kita lihat, hilang satu benda. Kalau kita lihat kepada background dia, sebelum kita nak implement auto verification di sesuatu hospital, mungkin sejak daripada beberapa tahun kebelakangan ini kita asyik bercakap tentang auto verification contohnya, tapi is it everyone must implement auto verification or who supposed to implement auto verification? Mungkin hospital saya kecil, saya rasa saya tak perlu pun implement auto verification, or mungkin hospital saya besar tapi saya ada cukup manpower yang tak memerlukan saya kepada result yang dikeluarkan secara automatik, sebab saya merasakan bahawa keperluan itu tak ada contohnya. Tapi maksudnya kita melihat kepada bagaimana workload. Ini menjurus juga kepada workload kepada satu-satu ujian yang memerlukan auto verification ataupun tidak. Dan of course we look into our quality performance, whether we are confident enough with our test that this test can be released without any manual intervention or manually review by human. And to have a system, definitely you need to have a very good in terms of teamwork and also the acceptance as staff member, team member, and as well as our management level, and as well as our end user or our customer, whether they understand what we are doing. So yang ni penting sebab kita nak supaya the process, it is consider something in terms of change management from something that which is we do routinely as a traditional way into something which is new system, where sometimes at the first place it cause a lot of problem during the transition period. So luckily that in Penang we have a very strong team that we can work together, and of course we have to make sure that everyone understand our objective and what we want to get at the end of the, in every of our planning. We also need to look into the complexity of the hospital, because by understanding the complexity, we know what kind of algorithm, what kind of rules that require in our system. In Hospital Pulau Pinang, for example, we have, I think, the most number of such specialty in Hospital Pulau Pinang. When I'm in Hospital Seberang Jaya, the complexity probably not much the same, but still there's some challenges when we look into different hospital setting, because definitely we cannot duplicate or we cannot implement the same thing in all hospital where you need to look into the unique of the hospital or laboratory. And the most important, of course, whether we are prepared in terms of our IT infrastructure. So this is, we really need to understand. I'm not an IT expert, but then because I love use this kind of LRS or IT to help or to improve our work process, then what we do that we are giving ideas and we look into how we can improve our workflow in our system. And this is the one that without tech is actually, we also require the support and the understanding from the vendor to support us in terms of how we can implement the auto verification. And of course, why I'm so confident to do auto verification for the past, when I start working in Hospital Pulau Pinang, I have to validate all sort of result, and majority or 70% of the result actually doesn't require any attention. Then I feel that I'm doing something no added value in terms of releasing the result, just giving pressure in terms of releasing, but sometimes most of the time we still do mistake because we are unable to give attention to those results that actually require attention or troubleshooting from us. So I won't focus in details in terms of how we create the algorithm, how we do the design, but I will touch more on the clinical, as this is the objective, but what we want in terms of how we can incorporate our clinical knowledge into the algorithm of auto verification. So it's important for us to have a design and plan. This is why, as I mentioned earlier, I start by doing manual validation in all areas of biochemistry result in my hospital. So when I do the manual verification, first I know who requests what test. This clinic, this is what we request, what kind of test, what kind of complexity that I'm going to have from different type of requester. I know this doctor will request what kind of test, and I will know that the challenges or things that might, that we are going to encounter from each of the result. And this is the thing that actually that we want our system to capture it, to make sure that kind of the result that require troubleshooting can be stranded, and we can do what we're supposed to do specifically to the result that require our attention. So after we have our design and our plan, sounds like we want to decorate our house based on the interior design. Now we look into what kind of filter that we want to have. Rather than we have to review all the result, but now we want to filter one by one based on the filter or based on the criteria that we want to set in our laboratory information system. So ini adalah filter yang kita nak buat lah. Sama ada kita nak lihat kepada interferences, sama ada kita melihat kepada our RCV, kepada maybe if we want to incorporate your MU or anything that in the system, even the quality IQC performance before the result can be auto-verified. And the third one is, of course, this is the power that we want, how we want to transform our idea in our brain into the algorithm. So this is saya ambil daripada nota anak saya lah, because dia belajar algorithm. So its algorithm is set of step in certain order to achieve a goal. So maksudnya now we have our idea. Actually, this is the thing that how we think in our brain. But now the one that we think in our brain, we're going to emulate that into algorithm that's going to be written into a computer language or computer system. So that will be transformed into action that that going to be done by our laboratory information system. So for example, how we want to move this night into the star. So the step that require based on the algorithm, whether it's going to be like this or it's going to be like the second one. So this is important for us to have the algorithm and logic. So try whether I can do A. If I can do A, I can do B, C. So just like how you review the result based on your manual review. So as I mentioned, we also need to know about our IT or infrastructure, whether what you have in our lab, in your lab, whether you have a good laboratory information system, whether your instrument come with data management system or some sort like control unit or software. You have a very powerful middleware. So identify what is the system that you have currently, or if not, probably it need to be included in your futures tender planning or something that can be done based on your discussion with your vendor or with your IT expert or with your LIS vendor. So this is just I'm simplifying based on whatever filters algorithm that we have is depend what you have in your lab. For example, in our lab we do have our instrument software and also middleware, but our middleware is not that powerful in terms of helping us for the auto verification. So we are basically based on our control unit or data management system in our lab. So that is actually our first filter in terms of the result that need to be stranded at the control unit or data manager. And of course, in terms of to make sure that the internet quality control is acceptable. And this is the first stage where every single result need to be reviewed. Yang kita cakap sebagai data review, maksudnya every single result that have some sort like, kalau dia ada flag ke, ada alarm ke, more than test ke, less than test ke, this is actually result that we stranded at our control unit. And this result need to be reviewed by the duty MLT or scientist before whether result going to be stranded or result can be pushed or can be sent into middleware or laboratory information system. So this is very, very crucial, because once the result go to the laboratory information system, the algorithm will start filtering, and algorithm will start doing the checking whether this result can be auto flow or auto validated, or the result will be manual validation. So when it comes to the manual validation, this goes to the data review. troubleshooting as well as the consultation, whether we want to do the proactive consultation or sometimes we need to do a reactive consultation when there is complaint or feedback or some discussion from our customers. So this is basically some of the algorithm that we can implement in our LIS lah. Maksudnya kalau ada sample flag, this is apa yang saya cakap sebagai the first level at the middleware ataupun dekat control unit kita. So when we talk about result auto verification, it must be comprehensive. It must be well planned and it must involve everyone in the team. So that's why we talk about quality, we talk about technical aspect. If in your lab you do have 100 tests or 120 tests, 80 tests, means that you need to know the performance, the technical aspect, the quality, the interferences of each of your tests. Just like I do have 3 children, so I kena faham perangai 3 orang anak, but now in the lab I have, for example, I have 80 tests, so I have to know each of my 80 tests punya perangai, because it behave differently, it going to be interpret differently. And macam saya cakap, kita juga melihat kepada clinical error. So what we are talking today, we are looking into how our clinical knowledge, clinical input need to be incorporated into our result auto verification. We know the technical aspect, we know the clinical aspect, then this is certain thing that need to be incorporated to make sure that the result can be auto verified or the result can be troubleshoot accordingly. So when we review a result, of course, kalau kita tak tahu apa yang sepatutnya kita tahu, kita akan mungkin akan release ataupun kita tak akan buat apa-apa. Means if you don't know what you're supposed to do or you don't understand the concept, then probably people might think that, oh, if the QC is passed, of course the result will be passed. Nothing wrong with the result, but actually our analyzer unable to differentiate whether this result have a potential to be harmful to the patient or not. This result have some interferences that cause some bias or some reduction or some increment to the result. So this is the thing that unable to be analyzed by our current analyzer until in near future kalau ada analyzer yang dapat specifically do all this sort of interpretation. So that's why we have to understand, and when that's why I put this kind of error, because when we do the data review, either at the control unit or at our software ataupun dekat LIS, we need to look into vertical review. Means that across when we review this LLP result, we don't just see LLP result as one result need to be validated, but we see whether this LLP has some agreement or some is concordant with other result, whether it can be acceptable, it can be explained across of this RP result and the liver function test result. And as well as we look into horizontally. Horizontally means that based on this result and across of this result for this patient, based on current and previous result, as well as we look into this patient result across horizontally to all the other patient result. Or let's say now even we do have the patient movement average to look into horizontally to all the other patient result that we analyze in the lab. So actually this kind of data review purposely for every patient, every single sample. So we want to detect whether there is evidence of random error, whether there is evidence of interferences, or whether there is a potential for us to add on value in terms of interpretation or in terms of our consultation to our end user or our customer. And also we would like to know whether this is actually the tip of the iceberg, that there is a potential systematic error that actually occur during our result validation. So I think this is, I think most of us already understand the concept of result validation, and this is the thing that we want to capture when we do result validation, as well as we want to do the auto verification of the result. So we must find the step with the algorithm to make sure that we don't miss this kind of review. So for the purpose of today's discussion, I just highlighting into three basics. These cases where how we want to tackle things like multiple myeloma cases, patient with multiple myeloma, how we want to tackle in terms of patient with in vivo hemolysis, and also some sort of lipid abnormality. So this is actually a very bread and butter, especially in Hospital Pulau Pinang, where we are the hematology center for northern region. We are facing samples of multiple myeloma every other day. So that's why we must have a system to make sure that we don't miss this. In vivo hemolysis, otherwise it's not that common, but when it happens, and if we don't know how to handle that, probably we will miss this kind of cases, and it may harm patients, especially where there is no result being generated. Lipid abnormality, or basically the lipidemia, if let's say you don't know how to handle it as well, probably you're releasing the result which is a false result that's supposed not to be generated or to be released. So this is, for example, that the data that I got from our data manager in Hospital Pulau Pinang. So this actually a sample have a gel sample, and it given alarm, this kind of alarm, that this kind of result we don't send to our laboratory information system. So for example, this bilirubin have the prozone alarm, and the total protein has alarm of more than test with the sodium result of 125. So this is what we call that vertically, when we see the result of total protein require further dilution, and it give 104. When the result of total protein 104, this is a sky high total protein. So there is a two possibilities. Either it's truly it's just a hyperproteinemia due to globulin, high globulin due to inflammatory response, or it could be due to the paraprotein in cases of multiple myeloma. So you can see that this sodium 125 probably, whether it's a true 125 or either this sodium actually is lower due to the high total protein. And you can see that the first result of 334.4, if we just release this result 34.4, actually this result still have a technical error due to the process. So you have to make sure that this kind of result need to be stranded, and troubleshooting need to be done before result can be sent into LIS. So what is multiple myeloma? In the very brief discussion, it's actually a cancer of plasma cell, and it produces paraprotein. And the paraprotein doesn't mean that the protein is abnormal protein, but actually it is abnormality in terms of product where it's produced a single clone of plasma cell. So our body reaction to the foreign particle is by producing immunoglobulin. So actually we do have different type of immunoglobulin, the heavy chain and light chain. And when in multiple myeloma, what happened that is only producing a single clone of plasma cell, so either IgA or IgM, kappa or IgA, lambda, and it causes a suppression of all others normal immunoglobulin in terms of immunoparesis. So this is how the normal reaction of body producing for the plasma cell producing different type of antibodies, very colorful. But when it comes to myeloma, it will be very homogeneous, only one type of antibody, and it's too many, and that cause that patient unable to react to infection, and it cause a lot of complication due to this multiple myeloma. And we do have a different type of heavy chain. As I mentioned, we have G, A, D, E, and M. And of course the IgM have larger molecule because it's in the form of pentameric. It's the 5 molecule of IgM will be attached together as the IgM pentameric, and the IgA probably can be dimeric or trimeric. So this is important because if I take from our back insert, is in every single test of our biochemistry test, we mentioned that in very rare cases, gammopathy, in particular type IgM, so IgM we call it the Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia, it might cause it may cause interference to the result. So this is the claim given by the manufacturer, and of course this claim is important, and we need to make sure that we don't miss this kind of cases. So this is the gel, because in Hospital Pulau Pinang, we do report our protein electrophoresis. For example, this patient have IgM kappa. So it's either gel sample is not that common, but most likely contributed by IgM, because the pentameric cause a very jelly sample. But it's not that every day we're going to get a gel sample. But when you get a gel sample, probably most of the time that no result can be generated. So this is where we know that this result come from a sample with a very high total protein, and this also may cause a lot of interference that need to be review, and we need to make sure that all the troubleshooting can be done. And of course, if let's say this is the first sample, probably in the proactive measure that we have to discuss with the managing team, saying that this is sample actually it's a propagated sample, and based on other blood investigation, it's very suspected that this patient could have underlying, could be contributed by plasma cell dyscrasia or multiple myeloma, and we may suggest further investigation need to be done for this patient. So it's important that we have to understand that whether we are capturing the paraprotein sample, because the paraprotein effect has a long list of effect that can cause a lot of error of fastidious of result due to the hyperviscosity, precipitation. It can cause a lot of pseudo or hyponatremia, and I think I don't want to mention because it's very long list of effect that can cause result. A wrong result going to be generated or to be released. That's why I'm saying that we cannot just believe everything result come from the machine can be released, because we have to analyze it to make sure that result that undergone troubleshooting only can be released, and we need to notify and discuss, because sometimes if we just release the result after troubleshooting without let our managing team knowing that there is some problem with the sample, then they will just regard that this is just a normal sample, or no, nothing, no attention is required, because we are the first one that encounter the sample, and we know that there is something wrong with the sample, and this is reflecting underlying disease for the patient. So this need to be communicated to the managing team. So how are we going to have our auto verification logic? So now I'm already talk about multiple myeloma. For example, this is a clinical case of multiple myeloma, and in your hospital probably you are a hematological center. And even though without a hematological center, once you got this kind of cases, then probably how are we going to manage it? It's happened one is blue moon, then something that we might forget, and what we're going to do that we're going to reject the sample again and again until no result can be released. So it's still a good idea to have some alarm system in our laboratory information system to make sure that this sample that require attention can be reviewed before it can be released. So filter that we can have, for example, at our data manager or any of the software that you have based on your vendor, if let's say the gel sample, no result at all can be generated in the system. When we review this sample is clear, nothing can be seen, there is no fibrin, but still when pipetting it looks like jelly. So probably this is contributed by the paraprotein, and also the flag and alarm that we can review. And also we also need to review based on the reaction monitor how the reaction of each of the analyte based on the instrument specification. And how we want to capture the paraprotein, probably as I mentioned earlier, when there is cases of hyponatremia. So every single cases of hyponatremia actually there's still a potential of pseudo hyponatremia. So when talk about pseudo hyponatremia, it could be a truly the pseudo hyponatremia due to high lipid index or high lipemic index, or it could be due to high total protein. So when there is the first time sample of low sodium, especially a very extreme low sodium, we need to be more careful because we have to make sure that this is not a case of pseudohyponatremia. So in our lab, that all the critical results of sodium, of course, it need to be surrendered before it can be notified. And even though we implement auto verification, none of the critical result can be auto validate. Even though previously was 110 sodium, but current result of 110 sodium, it won't be auto validate because we still surrender it as a critical result that need to be reviewed. So when there is evidence of hyponatremia, of course, we need to rule out pseudohyponatremia as well as to rule out any evidence of random error that cause hyponatremia. But this is also, you have to think of multiple myeloma as well. And if there is evidence of hyperphosphatemia when the phosphate is very high, and also the most significant, good indicator in terms of paraprotein level is when you look into the total protein, when the total protein is very high. So we talk about hyperphosphatemia. In our lab, we are using molybdate UV. So this is a reaction between phosphate and ammonium molybdate with the hydrous sulfate, and we produce the ammonium phosphomolybdate. So how the paraprotein cause the interference mean that this precipitation or reaction of the paraprotein to this ammonium molybdate. So it may cause, the end of result become more light scatter and then cause a phosphate level, high phosphate level, or if not, even the paraprotein may bind with the phosphate itself. So this is how the reaction, one of the example how the paraprotein affect to the analyte during the measurement. So based on our understanding, the multiple myeloma is whenever the total protein is high, the possibility of multiple myeloma or inflammatory response. So what we can put that any result of the total protein is high, we put at more than 100. And why we put this? Because last time when we start implement auto verification, total protein is not critical result. So when the total protein is not a critical result, what happened? What was happened that, for example, this patient, in the case of multiple myeloma, the total protein was 110 on the first day. So we know that this is 110, and we do troubleshooting, and we do measure sodium with direct IC method. What happened that the next day when the patient sent again total protein, and the total protein still maintained 110 yesterday and 110 of today, and based on RCV, there is no significant difference, and it happened that this result been auto validated. So based on this experience, we feel that we have to put some alert system to make sure that even though the total protein consistently is the same and higher, as a result, it shouldn't be auto validated. It need to be surrendered. This is the problem when you implement auto verification. So you have to make sure that any result which is abnormal but being auto validated, because because the system, the LIS just fulfill the rule that we put. If you pass the RCV, then the result can be auto validated. So based on this, we created the paraprotein alert where any total protein is high. We still need to verify the sodium with the direct IC, and as well as to check all the photometric tests whether the result can be reported or not. So this is, for example, the total bilirubin. This is in our analyzer. This is the reaction monitor of our QC level 1, and this is the reaction monitor for the total protein in our patient sample. So you can see that the baseline reaction monitor, if compared to the QC level 1, is so much different. This is erratic to the erratic baseline in the patient sample. So basically, this is not acceptable, and we have to review back whether the result can be reported or not. So we do have, I have case that, for example, this is a 65 years old male with pathological fracture. Skeletal surveys show a lighted lesion in the skull, persistently hypercalcemia and deranged renal profile, normochromic, normocytic anemia. So the clinical features of multiple myeloma usually based on the pneumonia of CRAB, C-R-A-B, C for hypercalcemia, R is renal impairment, A anemia, and B of bone lesion. So this patient fulfill all those criteria. This is very direct case. Sometimes patient may not fulfill the CRAB criteria, but still can be multiple myeloma. So and SPA and the immunophysician requested, and this patient have IgA kappa paraproteinemia, so probably IgA kappa myeloma. So as I mentioned earlier, this is how the system being stranded. Even though whenever the total protein is high, more than 100, and even though now we put it even lower to 90, so these two set of alert will be come out. The system requested us to do sodium verification of direct IIC and as well as a paraprotein interference verification. What I mean by paraprotein interference verification means that we will check back every single test that requested, whether there is a possibility of interference. We will check every single reaction monitor of the test compared with the QC reaction monitor, whether the test can be reported or not, or whether the test the sample require further dilution or not. So for example, this system we already documented the history of relapse IgG kappa multiple myeloma. So everybody will know that this patient is really a case of multiple myeloma. So back to the patient, how we detected this patient have a very high calcium hypercalcemia with the renal impairment. And when we do sodium, we change the sodium result instead of reporting the first result sodium from our indirect IC by using our direct IC measurement. So this patient initial, as I mentioned, initial sodium was 124, but when we do the verification with direct IC, it became 142. So based on our correlation study of our direct and indirect sodium measurement, it will be, in between 5 millimole per liter. So this is so much different, 124 and 142. So we have to report the 142 and we give the comment saying that we measure the sodium with direct IC method to prevent the pseudo hyponatremia. And as well as I mentioned, this patient also have the phosphate level is moderately increased due to the paraprotein interference. So how when we understand the multiple myeloma, we understand the behavior of the how the impact of the multiple myeloma to our sample, our result. Then we have to incorporate into our result auto replication. So second clinical scenario is in vivo hemolysis. So this is how I got a WhatsApp from my MLT in one of our district hospital. Dia cakap serum patient macam kopi O. Saya dah reject sampel ni banyak kali. What I supposed to do? Semua result tak dapat baca. So this is where it's important for us to understand. In the district hospital, this might occur once in 2 years, one year, or there is no cases at all. Once it happened, that they might not know how to handle this kind of cases. And you can see that in our data control unit, the hemolysis index is very high, 1,116. It caused a very high LDH, even require further dilution and more reaction, 4,000, and all other enzymes also more than absorbent. So this result definitely will be stranded in our control unit. We don't send the result to LIS, and by right, a normal case, in a normal procedure, this kind of result need to be rejected. But you can't keep rejecting a sample, so this is something fishy that need further clarification. So there's different in vivo and in vitro hemolysis. If in vivo, it means that there is happening inside the body. It's either due to extravascular or intravascular, whereas the in vitro is the most common causes is due to artificial or due to pre-identical error. So it's important for us to differentiate this in vivo and in vitro, as it's critically important for patient safety and clinical management. So based on this paper, hemolyzed specimen and reason for rejection, actually based on the 505 hemolysis sample that they analyzed, it is about 16 cases that have in vivo hemolysis, and that's quite important that out of these 16 cases, actually 5 cases, the clinician did not suspect any evidence of in vivo hemolysis. It's only after brought out into attention by the laboratory personnel. So this is our rule in terms of understanding the clinical condition and also incorporate it into our result authentication. And it's important because hemolysis samples are critical, and then we have to communicate, not just simply rejecting every single sample that grossly hemolyzed, and this also need consensus between us and our clinician. And this is a case that we have reported, and based on these cases, a case that we reported, actually we come up that how we want to make sure that we don't just simply reject our grossly hemolyzed samples, and there must be ways incorporated into our result authentication. For example, this is a case of 33 years old male with underlying of hypertension, dyslipidemia, and end-stage renal failure. Was brought to ED with severe epileptic pain radiating to the back and associated with SOB, shortness of breath. Prior to the presentation, underwent 4 hours of dialysis. It's noted that patient have multiple time of grossly hemolyzed sample and was rejected until the 3rd sample. Because we do educate our MLT, the first sample, we reject and we requested second sample to look into pre-entry error. Actually, by second or third sample, if let's say still evidence of grossly hemolyzed, then they should communicate with us, and we need to look into the possibility of in vivo hemolysis. So this is the result of this patient. What the most significant that even though in very grossly hemolyzed sample, the potassium result still within 4.2, within normal range, with a very high LDH as evidence of hemolysis. So when you talk about in vivo, what is the possible causes? Probably due to mechanical RBC rupture due to artificial heart valve, or as well as treatments such as hemodialysis. So as far as I encountered those all cases of our cases of in vivo hemolysis, most of it related to patient of end-stage renal failure, and most likely related to the hemodialysis, and sometimes could be due to sepsis or toxic poisoning, infection, and also the antigen antibody reaction. So we need to know, when we communicate with our clinician, then we might know whether possibility of this pathology that suit with problem that we encounter with the patient. So how we detect it? By incorporate the, if we have, the first time is a paraprotein alert. So the second, by our understanding, saying that when patient have a very high degree of hemolysis index, very high degree of hemolysis, sampai jadi kopi O. So there is some sort like the possibility of in vivo hemolysis there. And the second criteria that we have, that whenever there is hemolysis, grossly hemolyzed, we will check the potassium value. The potassium value is high, most likely this is in vitro, meaning that the RBC rupture outside of the body. And we look into others parameters where I won't discuss this in details of the in vivo in vitro. And of course, the provided sample was taken with proper sampling method. So this is how we incorporate in our result verification. It's still auto verification, and result will be stranded, and we will check the hemolysis index with the potassium. Why? Because why we put potassium? The only reason that I encountered that all the cases of in vivo that we encounter, that the potassium will be normal or slightly lower, high normal, or that it won't be that sky high compared to other hemolysis index, even though with the hemolysis lower hemolysis index. So this is the only thing that we can explain, that in case of in vivo hemolysis, our body still able to regulate the potassium to be normal to prevent the hyperkalemia. So do not harm. We can't reject this kind of in vivo hemolysis. Instead, that it need to be released, and this is also need to be. If in normal procedure, all result need to be stranded, or certain result needs to be stranded due to interference with the. Of course, LDH is the lowest. Is the analyte with the lowest hemolysis index interference. Once it's RBC rupture, the LDH will be released. But in case of hemolysis, in vivo hemolysis, the LDH need to be reported, because there is evidence of how we're going to monitor the in vivo hemolysis itself. So it's very important to have the system to make sure that the difference between in vivo and in vitro can be differentiated, and we can communicate with our managing team. This is what we have in our system. For example, this patient hemolysis of 700, potassium 8. This potassium is high. It's not normal potassium. So, and this is the first sample. Probably we can just reject this sample, asking for the second sample. But if let's say this is the first sample, 1000 something, then the potassium's, between 4 to 5, then we should start thinking whether this is a true, hemolysis in vitro or in vivo. Then we might request for the second sample after we advise our managing team the correct way of doing pre-analyticals to prevent hemolysis due to the pre-analytical error. So the last one is some lipid abnormality, lipemics. So I have two cases that recently we encountered. This is a 37 years old man, active smoker, no medical illness, with 3 episodes of central chest pain. The physical examination are remarkable, and series of ECG is sinus rhythm with T inversion, and there's no dynamic changes. So the preliminary diagnosis was cardiac syncope. But the problem with this patient that the sample that we received is very lipemic. The sample is whitish in color, and our LI system come out with this specimen is grossly hemolyzed, unsuitable for routine. So we have to reject, and then at the same time, the lipemic index is 1025. And when we review the data monitor, all the other results being interfered because the sample that easily to be interfered by our lipemic is ALT giving more than absorbent. TG giving more than kinetic, and AST is more than absorbent. And we proceed troubleshooting. For the troubleshooting, actually, the TG of this patient is very high, 37.93. So I never seen such a high TG before, but this patient have a very high TG. And what happened actually in this patient, and this is also the reaction monitor for the patient that we see and review. You can see that for the ALT, actually the erratic base also not acceptable if compared to the QC. And this is also for ALT. Then there's some, whether we can accept or not based on the erratic baseline of the AST. And we did send samples to Hospital Pulau Pinang because this is patient from Hospital Seberang Jaya. We requested for the high-speed centrifugation, and after the high-speed centrifugation, when we take the supernet, they took the sample, rerun it back, and result can be generated, and there's no flag or alarm after the high-speed certification. So this is the way of to overcome, or in Hospital Seberang Jaya, what we managed to do, just do the further dilution before sample can be reanalyzed. So when talk about hyperlipidemia, in this patient, actually patient was not diagnosed as hyperlipidemia before, a lipid disorder, and whenever TG is very high, there's also the risk of acute pancreatitis. So that's why we do discuss with the managing team whether this patient has possibility of acute pancreatitis or chronic pancreatitis. And when we review back, actually this patient came to our hospital with the same complaint in March 2020, and actually no result was released during that time because there is no lipemic alert was implemented, and then patient was discharged without any blood investigation. And actually we missed patient without lipid profile, and that's why when we received this sample, we straightly discussed with the managing team saying that this patient need to be admitted and it need to be further reviewed. And we suggested of the lipid profile, and when the lipid profile is sky high, more than 35, then likely the patient started upon discharge, and we hope that when patient come back, the lipids control, because with all triad of a smoker, high lipid, and possibility of metabolic disorder, or as well as patient may have cardiovascular risk. Very high, potential to have the cardiovascular risk. So the cause of lipemia could be all sort of lipid disorder. I'm not going to discuss this today, and as well as of others secondary causes of hyper-TG in children and adolescents. The same thing happened recently that we do receive a 8-year-old girl came to the hospital with lethargy, loss of weight, loss of appetite for 1 month, and abdominal discomfort for 3 days with shortness of breath and fever for 1 day. And the reformate or the glucometer reading during AAE emission is 26.4 millimole per liter with urine ketone of 4 plus, and patient was diagnosed as diabetes type 1, and this patient also come with the lipemic. Every single sample that sent to us is a lipemic, but it's not as severe as the previous gentleman, and patient was diagnosed as severe DKA with metabolic acidosis. So the other evidence that this if lipemic was not resolved even the post overnight fasting, so we should think that actually this is not due to fasting, to the meal itself. And when we review back the patient's result, actually lipid profile was not requested, so we reminded the managing team that this patient is lipemic, because they don't understand what it means by lipemic itself. So we saw that this lipemic is not some sort like patient is not fasting, or patient the patient have underlying metabolic disorder, and when the lipids profile saying actually patient have a hypercholesterolemia of 7.2. So they started as a type 1 diabetes, started on subglytropic, and for the moment they don't start with anti-lipids medication, but they refer to dietitian before further management can be decided later. So this is how we discuss with our pedagogy team. Based on the result and based on the review that we see whether they miss something, or we can advise them that certain tests be missed, or certain tests that need to be added. So this is how ways of how lipid removal done according to the European survey. I don't know how many lab in Malaysia that have high speed certification to overcome lipid samples. So this is the alert. Of course, we still need to consider lipemic sample may cause pseudohyponatremia. And this is the protocol that we have in our lab. We put as low as 150, where when the lipemic index is more than 150, result going to be stranded and require further verification. So at last, back to the thing that I mentioned, we need to understand the quality aspect, the technical as well as the clinical when we do the result auto verification. And these are the data that I generated from LIS in year 2020. Actually, we have 3,180 alerts. Out of it is 15 contributed by hemolysis alert. Second by our paraprotein alert, and third one by lipemic alert. And this is the other alert that I don't mention. Any other, we do have other clinical condition that we incorporate. For example, AKI, the most number that alert that contributed in our system is AKI alert. It's about 50.4%, and followed by discordance of thyroid function test, hemolysis, paraprotein, lipemic. So there is a total of 10,621 alert system in our LIS that require our scientists, our pathologists and MLT to review each of the result and do troubleshooting. So result automation actually doesn't come with just kita goyang kaki sajalah, but we still need to do a lot more in terms of troubleshooting before we can release the result. And there are actually about 2,152 direct ISE, sodium direct ISE sodium measurement was done in the year of 2022 to do the verification either for the paraprotein, or even we want to rule out random error. So it shows that this is document that important. It can be put in even in our SKT, saying that how many KPI that we needed to make sure that every scientist, MLT, pathologist maintain the competency. So we can get all this data, and we documented every troubleshooting in our system. So at last, when talk about result auto verification, it's important to have the skill of a data review and do troubleshooting. Not just like ada result, then result boleh release lah. But instead of ada result, now we have to whether the result can be released or not, whether we need to have further troubleshooting or not. And of course, we have to add value in terms of our proactive consultation. We make ourselves to be part of the managing team. We make ourselves that we are around for consultation. And the most important that we have to realize that every single sample that we analyze probably our own sample, our family sample, and of course even patient sample that need to be we really need to handle it to make sure that patient safety. We cannot just finally release the result. We cannot just release the result without thing need to be done to make sure that only result that undergone throughout troubleshooting and verification it can be released. So saya nak ucapkan terima kasih to all our team members, especially untuk Encik Sari Mesatari, our senior officers, Puan Hanita Hashim, our senior officers, all our chemical pathologists in Hospital Pulau Pinang, Puan Hairani and Hospital Seberang Jaya, all our teammates in Hospital Pulau Pinang, Hospital Seberang Jaya, all the MLTs and scientific officer in all 6 hospital in Negeri Pulau Pinang. Tanpa kerjasama semua, I think we are not able to implement all this kind of result authentication into the state, and they are really bear with us, and especially dengan saya lah kan, because I always very strict with everyone to make sure that thing can be implemented. So by that I thank you, and thank you from all of us from Hospital Seberang Jaya. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Dr. Jamsani di atas ceramah yang begitu menarik dan panjang lebar tadi ya. Jadi sementara menunggu soalan daripada ruangan chat, saya mulakan dengan satu soalan dulu. Untuk auto verification, ianya bergantung kepada RCV kan, reference change value. Jadi bagaimana kalau sesuatu reference change value yang kita kira tu sangat besar. Jadi that means kalau sebarang variation antara result tu daripada mungkin result yang pertama dan kedua tu mungkin agak besar, tetapi tidak boleh di-capture melalui RCV.
Okay, Rusli, sorry. So basically berdasarkan pengalaman saya, semua RCV kita tu sangat kecil. So dari segi most of the time disebabkan RCV tu tak begitu besar, most of the time kita dapat kita punya delta field tu most of it is false delta field sajalah. So dia tak begitu dia sangat sensitif tapi tak begitu spesifik kadang-kadang. So that one is accordingly it can be adjusted lah. And what we do it based on our clinical interpretation. How significant result for current result to previous result, baru kita tengoklah sama ada kita boleh adjust ke tak benda tu. As I mentioned in one of the conference, macam contohnya creatinine, if we really use into the RCV of creatinine, I think saya tak ingat tapi dalam less than 10 probably. So kalau macam tu memang banyak je result kita stranded and it's false alarm. Even now we are putting based on the clinical interpretation of based on AKI, we put based on the AKI interpretation. So it's less but still numbers tu banyak jugalah. And now kita menggunakan berdasarkan our AKI punya alert lah.
Okay, Dr. Jamsani, soalan yang kedua daripada ruangan chat. How you handle some test result are not tally with normal clinical condition. For example, CKMB more than total CK or serum natriuretic but total bilirubin relatively high.
Mana tu?
Ruangan chat.
How you handle some test result are not tally with normal clinical condition, CKMB more than total CK or serum natriuretic but total bilirubin relatively high. So this is the thing that I don't know. I have to review a case by case basis. But this is what we call as a concordant check. We look into vertically the result. For example, this CKMB. I mean, this total CKMB more than total CK. Then whether there's something wrong with the CKMB itself or the CK itself that need to be reviewed. And second one, like serum not iterate but total bilirubin relatively high. So how high the total bilirubin and what you mean by atrix? Is it by measurement or is it by manual? Is it by system? Then kita kena tengok lah. Then this is actually a good example how the concordant test of the result can be implemented and this kind of result can be strengthened. Sebab by right, based on our study in Hospital Pulau Pinang, our iterate index and total bilirubin is very good in correlation. So if the iterate index is high, the total bilirubin should be high. And it's not like lipemic. If the lipemic index is high, doesn't mean that total cholesterol can be high and vice versa. But iterate is very good correlation, not just based on our study, but based on other published papers. So this is what we mean by troubleshooting required lah.
Okey, kemudian soalan yang seterusnya daripada Nafisah Muhammad Noor. Can you explain back the erratic baseline for reaction monitoring?
So yang ni adalah reaction monitor. Apa yang saya tunjuk tu berdasarkan instrumen yang kita pakai lah. Kita pakai Roche Analyzer. And this is actually, you have to understand in terms of the second bila dia start ambil reading in our spectrophotometer punya method. So apa yang saya masukkan erratic baseline tu, kita pun tak faham every single each of the test punya reaction, sebab yang tu adalah manufacturer and we are not afford to memorize. So apa yang kita buat adalah kita akan compare QC punya pattern dengan patient punya sample punya pattern. So sepatutnya kalau QC punya pattern bentuk Y, patient punya pattern punya result pun bentuk Y. Tapi kalau QC punya pattern bentuk Y tapi patient punya sample bentuk Z, yang tu yang kita panggil sebagai erratic. Dia tak sama baseline yang permulaan yang mula tu sebelum dia start reading tu is the baseline lah. And then after dia maksudnya sebelum dia blank punya tu dengan dia ada bacaan tu. So yang tu yang dipanggil sebagai erratic. Basically apa yang kita buat, kita hanya compare QC punya pattern dengan patient punya set pattern. So maksudnya kita nak supaya dia follow kita punya QC punya pattern lah. Tapi sometimes if let's say the result is too high, kita punya QC pun tak ada cover sampai that very high result, probably dia ada tak exactly the same but pattern probably the same lah.
Okay. Soalan yang seterusnya daripada Puan Fiza. Is it possible if we want to implement auto verification by certain test ataupun section?
Yang ni yang apa yang kita buat dulu masa mula-mula kita implement auto verification, kita tak implement semua sebab kita nak test drive. So kita start dengan a few tests before we implement keseluruhan. I think the first that we start to implement is our HbA1c. We start with our HbA1c because it's just a single instrument and single test. Even though it's quite complex, because we do have chromatogram, tapi kita start dengan yang tu dululah. Then only baru kita pergi pada our general biochemistry. Then only kita pergi kepada our endocrine tu, maka then only kita pergi pada therapeutic drug monitoring dan seterusnya. So even if you are not confident with the system you want to test, then you can just try, but that depend on how is your LIS setting. Saya tak boleh nak kata benda tu sama dengan hospital yang kita pakai lah. So even there are still some of the test dan kita tak buat auto verification pun. Some ada test tu sangat sikit. Contohnya prolactin, test kita tak banyak dan kita nak buat macro prolactin screening. So kita tak nak result to auto validate. So kita still review manually. And this is tak akan ganggu kita punya workload pun sebab sikit sangat.
Okay, lagi satu daripada Nafisah Muhammad Noor. Is the patient monitoring means patient moving average?
Oh, patient monitoring. Ini saya tak pasti apa yang dia refer pada patient monitoring, tapi apa yang kita pakai patient moving average tu maksudnya kita pakai patient result, patient sample punya result. Contohnya sodium. Hari ni kita terima 200 sodium. So this 200 sodium tu dia akan tabulate macam Alger chart. untuk dia ada SD dia di mana result itu akan once result baru masuk dia akan start plotting and plotting. So bila dia plot dia akan ada SD dia untuk result tu. So kalau katakan dia out daripada yang kita benarkan, so dia akan bagi alarm. So means that there is possibility ada systematic error. So apa yang kita buat untuk patient moving average ni untuk kita nak detect systematic error. Sebab kalau dalam hospital kita, sepatutnya tak semua patient kita potassium 7.5 daripada 100 patient sample tu, kalau semua 7.5 for example, ni there is systematically something wrong lah. So yang ni kalau kita nak buat basically mungkin there's some filter or some other discussion lah untuk the patient moving average.
Okay, one last question ya. Soalan daripada Dr. Nisa. Based on statistic given 74% not yet implement auto verification, what is the basic requirement need to do the auto verifications?
Okay, Dr. Hanisa, senior tanya. Okay, based on statistic given 74% not yet implement. Yang tu saya adalah alasan ni. One of it kebanyakannya sebab tak bersedia. Yang kedua tu sebab kebanyakan saya rasa even apa yang kami alami last time adalah kita punya LIS tu tak cukup bagus untuk kita nak set lah sebab kita tak ada tools. So that's the other one, and I think the major bug yang akan ada masalah sebab we are manual hospital. So bila kita manual hospital, kebanyakan kita rasa hesitate sebab data yang kita masukkan tu mungkin salah lah. So yang tu yang I think berapa banyak je hospital dekat Malaysia ni yang IT hospital yang mana data tu genie. So that need to be overcome before we can implement auto verification. It doesn't mean that we implement this type of auto verification other hospital. If you want to implement, you need to do the same thing. You have to understand your kelebihan dan kekurangan lah.
Okay, terima kasih Dr. Jamsani ya. Sebenarnya ada banyak lagi soalan-soalan ni. Kalau kita tengok dekat ruangan chat tu ada lagi beberapa soalan dan saya pun ada list of question kat saya ni. Tetapi disebabkan kita ada kekangan masa, jadi saya mengucapkan berbanyak-banyak terima kasih kepada Dr. Jamsani di atas kesudian untuk bersama-sama dengan kita semua untuk berkongsi pengalaman dan juga pengetahuan yang Dr. Jamsani ada tentang auto verification ya. Jadi saya akan share QR code untuk petang ini. Jadi mohon tuan-tuan dan puan-puan untuk scan kehadiran kepada CME kita pada hari ini dan sijil akan diberikan secara automatik setelah tuan-tuan dan puan-puan mengisi maklumat yang dikendaki lah. Okey, untuk makluman semua, CME yang seterusnya kita akan adakan pada 10 hari bulan Mac, masa yang sama pukul 3 petang. Tajuk adalah Application of EFLM Standard to Replace Stockholm Performance Standard. CME ini akan disampaikan oleh Puan Rosita Abdullah daripada Hospital Sungai Buloh. Jadi dengan makluman tersebut, saya sekali lagi mengucapkan banyak terima kasih kepada semua di atas kehadiran tuan-tuan dan puan-puan sekalian dan juga kerjasama yang telah diberikan oleh semua pihak ya, di dalam menjayakan sesi CME online kita pada hari inilah. Jadi dengan itu saya sudahi majlis kita dengan wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.